The oxygen alarm had stopped screaming an hour ago. Kelvin knew this meant the system had finally failed completely. She lay in the darkness of the luminescence of stars, her thin body wrapped in a thermal blanket that no longer produced heat. The Velshar battleship was dead, and she would be dead soon too. She had served the Velshar government for 230 years. She had been a diplomat, a negotiator, a voice of wisdom in the great councils of her people. She had helped shape the policies that kept the Velshar at the top of the galactic hierarchy. She had believed in their superiority. She had believed in their right to rule. She had been wrong about everything. The attack came without warning. One moment, Kelvin was reviewing colony reports in her private chamber. The next moment, the ship shook so violently that she fell to the floor. Warning systems blared. The lights went red. She heard the thunder of explosions from somewhere above, the sound of the vessel's shields collapsing under sustained fire. She had tried to reach the communication center. Her old legs, thin and fragile even by Velshar standards, carried her through corridors filled with smoke and the sounds of dying crew members. But the ship's corridors had become a maze of collapsed sections and fires. She had eventually made her way to the medical bay, where she found it empty. Everyone who could move had already abandoned the ship or died, trying to reach the escape pods. The communication logs told her the truth. Chancellor Vexter had issued the order to destroy her vessel. She was a traitor, the messages said. She had suggested in the last council meeting that humanity should have representation. She had actually argued that the humans, with their short lives and limited technology, possessed something valuable. She had called it moral character. She had called it integrity. The council had laughed at her. Vexter had not laughed. Vexter had decided that Kelvin was a liability, a respected diplomat spreading dangerous ideas about accepting inferior species as equals would destabilize the Velshar's control. So he had ordered her death. The attack had killed most of the crew. The emergency systems had failed. The backup systems had failed. The ship was now a tomb orbiting a dead moon, and Kelvin lay dying in the darkness, waiting for the end. She closed her eyes. This was how she would die. Not in honor, not in battle, not defending her people. She would die because she had dared to suggest that other species were worth something. She would die because she had lost faith in her own people's superiority. The cold was spreading through her body now. Her breathing had become shallow. Her hearts, the Velshar had three, were beating slowly and irregularly. She thought of the young human diplomat she had met 3 years ago. His name was Marcus. He had come to present humanity's case for expanded trade rights. The council had dismissed him without really listening. But Marcus had not become angry. He had simply spoken his truth clearly and without bitterness. He had said that humans wanted partnership, not charity. He had said they understood they were new to the galactic stage, but they were willing to work hard and learn. He had said his people valued honor and truth-telling above all else. The council had laughed at him too. But Kelvin had listened. And over the next 3 years, she had read everything about humanity. She had watched their early achievements. She had seen how they solved problems differently than the Velshar. They did not always choose the most efficient solution. Sometimes they chose the solution that was most merciful. Sometimes they chose the solution that protected the weakest among them, even when it cost them more. That was when she had started to question everything. Sound pierced through her fading consciousness. A loud, violent sound. An explosion, but not like the ones from hours before. This was different. This was closer. Kelvin's eyes opened. Through the cracked viewport, she saw something that made no sense. A small ship, sleek and built for speed, had latched onto the luminescence of stars. A human ship. She recognized the design from her studies. A human exploration vessel, far from human space. attempting a docking procedure with a dead Velshar. Battleship. They were either very brave or very stupid. The docking pressurization took several minutes. She heard the sounds of the airlock cycling, heard the seal forming. Then came the sound of boots on metal. Human boots. A human was on her ship. Then more humans. She heard them moving through the corridors, heard their voices calling out in their harsh, beautiful language. They were looking for survivors. They were looking for her. Calivan tried to move, but her body would not obey. She was too far gone. The cold had taken too much of her strength. She could not stand. She could not even call out. She could only wait and see if the humans would find her in time. Not that it mattered. Whatever the humans did, she was still going to die. But at least someone would find her body. At least the Velshar would not be able to claim she had simply vanished. The medical bay door opened. A human stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the lights from the corridor. He was tall, with the broad shoulders of his kind, with the strange flat face and the small eyes that Calivan had learned to recognize from her research. He wore a blue uniform with markings that indicated rank. He was a captain. She recognized the insignia. He did not hesitate. He did not scan for technology. He did not ask for passwords or access codes. He looked at her lying on the medical platform, and he saw a dying being that needed help. He moved forward with purpose. His hands, large and strong, carefully lifted her fragile body. He checked for injuries. He felt for a pulse. He did not treat her as an enemy. He treated her as something worth saving. "I've got her," he said into a communication device on his chest. "One survivor. Old Velshar female. She's in bad shape, but still alive." His voice was calm and professional. He cradled her in his arms like she weighed nothing, and maybe to him she did. A human body was denser, heavier, more muscular than a Velshar body. But he held her with gentleness. "We're coming back to the horizon's edge," he said. "Get medical ready. Cross-species protocols. We have no idea what she's been through." Calivan looked up at this human captain, and she realized she had been wrong about so many things. The Velshar Council had looked at humans and seen primitives. This human looked at her, an ancient alien from a race that had once hunted his kind from the stars. And he saw someone worth saving. He carried her toward the airlock, toward the human ship, toward a future neither of them could have predicted. And Calivan, who had expected to die in darkness and cold, found herself holding on to that small hope that survival brought. She closed her eyes, but not to die. She closed them because the light of the human ship was bright and new, and she was not ready to face it yet. The medical bay of the horizon's edge was nothing like Calivan expected. She had prepared herself for imprisonment, for interrogation, for the cold efficiency of human military detention. Instead, she found herself in a place designed for healing, with soft lights and machines that hummed with careful precision. Dr. Elena Warren was a woman in her middle years, with dark hair and efficient hands. She had not slept in more than 30 hours. Calivan could see the exhaustion in the way she moved, but her focus never wavered. She adjusted the medical pod settings, monitoring systems that had been hastily modified to work with Velshar physiology. "Your blood chemistry is stabilizing," Elena said, her voice steady and professional. "The hypothermia was severe, but your people can survive lower temperatures than most species. That worked in your favor." Calivan tried to speak, but her throat was too damaged. She made a sound that was barely recognizable as language. Elena immediately adjusted the medication in the pod, and Calivan felt her throat muscles relax slightly. "Don't try to talk yet," Elena said. "Your respiratory system took serious damage from the lack of oxygen. We've repaired what we could with the medical technology we have. The rest you'll have to heal naturally." Calivan wanted to ask why they were saving her. She wanted to know why humans would risk so much for a Velshar. She wanted to understand this behavior that violated every logical principle of survival and advantage. But she could not speak, so she simply observed. Elena moved with the confidence of someone who had spent her entire life studying medicine. She consulted data on screens that glowed with information, comparing Kelvin's readings to medical databases. Once, she looked directly at Kelvin and said, "You're going to make it." The captain saw to that. 3 days after Kelvin woke up, Captain Marcus came to the medical bay. He looked exhausted, as though he had not rested since pulling her from the dead ship. But he smiled when he saw her. "Welcome to the horizon's edge," he said. "I'm Captain Marcus Chun. You're safe here." Kelvin had regained enough function in her throat to produce words, though they came slowly and with difficulty. "Why?" she managed. "Why save me?" Marcus pulled a chair close to the medical pod and sat down. He did not answer immediately. He seemed to be thinking about how to explain something that should have needed no explanation. "Because you needed help," he finally said. "That's enough reason." "Your government will not approve," Kelvin said. "I am Velshar. I am an enemy of humanity. Are you?" Marcus asked. "I've been reviewing your public record. For the past 3 years, you've been arguing for peaceful relations with humanity. You actually supported our petition for expanded trade rights. You called our species worthy of respect." Kelvin had not known that Marcus would know this. She had not known that her private positions had become public knowledge. She closed her eyes. "That is why they tried to kill me." "I know," Marcus said. "The intelligence officers aboard this ship have been monitoring Velshar communications. We intercepted the order from your chancellor. They called you a traitor. They said you were spreading dangerous ideas." "I was," Kelvin admitted. "I suggested to the council that your people deserved a voice in galactic decisions. I said that I believed you had value beyond your military or economic output. I said that I thought you possessed something rare in the galaxy: integrity." Marcus smiled. "Well, you're not wrong. That was when the secure communication channel activated." The face that appeared on the screen was human, but the expression was stern and angry. Admiral Susan Hayes, commander of the Human Exploration Fleet, appeared in holographic form in the medical bay. "Captain Marcus Chun," the admiral said without greeting, "you are instructed to place the Velshar in containment immediately. Your orders are to maintain her under guard until we can determine her status as a prisoner of war or a potential intelligence asset." Marcus did not move. He did not salute. He did not acknowledge the direct order with even a nod. "With respect, Admiral," Marcus said carefully, "I'm maintaining her in medical care because she is a dying patient who needs treatment. The moment she is well enough to travel safely, we can discuss her status. But I will not move a severely injured person just to satisfy political concerns." "That is an order, Captain," the Admiral said, her voice dropping into the dangerous calm that came before serious consequences. "I understand, Admiral," Marcus replied, "and I'm not following it. We picked up a distress signal. We responded. We found a living being in critical condition, and we saved her life. That is what the Human Exploration Service is supposed to do. That is what humanity is supposed to do. I'm not going to apologize for that." The Admiral's face went darker. Kelvin could see the conflict playing across her features. Protocol demanded that she order Marcus arrested. Military discipline demanded that she enforce her authority. But something else was also visible in her expression. A kind of pride. A recognition that Marcus was right, even if she could not officially admit it. "This conversation is not over, Captain," the Admiral finally said. "But I'm suspending my previous order pending further review. Maintain medical care. However, I want her under observation at all times, and I want a full medical report every 6 hours. Understood, Admiral, Marcus said. The communication ended. Marcus turned back to Kelvin, and his expression softened slightly. That went better than I expected, he said. Kelvin stared at him. You defied a direct order from your commanding officer. I chose to follow a higher principle, Marcus said. The principle that all life has value. The principle that we save people because it's the right thing to do, not because it benefits us politically. The principle that defines my species as something better than just another power-hungry civilization trying to dominate the galaxy. Your government will punish you, Kelvin said. Probably, Marcus agreed. But I can live with that. I couldn't live with abandoning you to die. Over the next 2 weeks, Kelvin recovered. Elena managed her pain and her injuries with skill and compassion. Marcus visited her every day, and they talked. He told her about his family. He told her about why humans explored space. He said it was because they wanted to understand the galaxy, to find their place in it, to build connections with other species. We've never wanted to rule, he said. We want to belong. Kelvin realized that this human captain represented everything she had been slowly discovering about his species. Humans were not driven by the need for superiority. They were driven by the need for connection, for meaning, for doing the right thing even when it cost them. She thought of her entire civilization, built on the assumption that they were better than everyone else. She thought of Chancellor Vexter ordering her death because she had dared to question that assumption. She thought of the thousands of species under Velshar control, oppressed and manipulated, and she made a decision that would change everything. I want to testify, she told Marcus one afternoon as he sat beside her medical pod. Before the Galactic Council, I want to tell them the truth about what I have seen, about what your people are, about what my people have become. Marcus looked at her, and in his eyes, she saw something that the Velshar had never shown her. True respect. Not respect for her position or her age or her power, but respect for her courage. The security briefing took place in a sealed chamber deep within the horizon's edge. Marcus, Kelvin, Dr. Elena, and 2 human intelligence officers gathered around a table covered with data screens. The air felt heavy with the weight of what they were about to do. Agent Sofia Torres was a woman with sharp eyes and sharper instincts. She had spent the last 15 years monitoring Velshar communications across the galaxy. What she had discovered painted a picture of systematic oppression that made Kelvin feel physically ill. The Velshar have manipulated at least 43 separate species, Sophia said. A voice clinical and factual. They share advanced weapons technology with compliant governments. They withhold it from those who resist. They have engineered wars between neighboring civilizations to maintain instability. Unstable regions cannot challenge Velshar authority. Kelvin listened to this recitation of her own government's crimes. Some of the tactics she recognized. She had attended council meetings where similar strategies were discussed in cold, bureaucratic language. Maintaining regional balance, they called it. Ensuring stability was how they framed it. But what Sophia was describing was calculated destruction of entire civilizations. There's more, Sophia continued. She activated a holographic display that showed records of an attack on a small planet in the outer colonies. The Velshar, specifically under Chancellor Vexter's authority, ordered the systematic destruction of an entire species. The Morathan, they were called. They were a peaceful agricultural civilization. Their only crime was that they refused to surrender their independence to the Velshar collective. Kelvin closed her eyes. She had known vaguely about the Morathan. The records had been sealed as a security matter. She had accepted the official explanation that they had been a threat. She had never asked for details. She had never wanted to know. I can find the evidence, Kelvin said slowly. I can access the council archives. I have clearance codes that are still valid. Chancellor Vexter will not have thought to revoke all of them in just a few weeks. He would assume I am already dead. It's too dangerous, Elena said immediately. If they discover you're trying to access those files, they'll know where you are. They'll track the signal and come after the ship. Then we don't let them discover it, said Levi Morrison, a human journalist who had been secretly embedded in the Velshar media system for 3 years. He was young, barely past 30, but he had earned the trust of 3 different alien species through his commitment to uncovering truth. I have access to encrypted communication channels. We can route the query through so many relays that the Velshar won't be able to trace it for days. Maybe weeks. Marcus leaned forward. What are you suggesting? A coordinated operation, Levi explained. Kelvin accesses the files. We get them transmitted through secure channels to multiple locations. I begin releasing information through my sources. We overwhelm their ability to contain the story. By the time the Velshar realize what's happening, the truth will be spreading across the entire galaxy. It was a dangerous plan. It was also the only plan that might work. Over the next 10 days, Cullivan worked with the human intelligence team. They set up a secure terminal in a hidden part of the ship. Using her authorization codes, she accessed the Velshar Council archives. The files were there, exactly where she knew they would be. Records of orders. Records of attacks. Records of species eliminated because they stood in the way of Velshar expansion. She found the Morathan records. 200,000 individuals, according to the census data. All dead. Killed by orbital bombardment on the order of Chancellor Vexter. She found records of the Kethvan slave trade. An entire civilization reduced to servitude so that the Velshar could extract their natural resources more efficiently. She found evidence of suppressed technology. The Velshar had discovered a method of faster-than-light travel 3,000 years ago, but had kept it hidden from all other species. They had developed it, perfected it, and then released it only to their allies. Every species that lagged behind in technology development had been deliberately held back by Velshar policy. Her hands shook as she compiled the files. These were not abstract facts. These were the concrete evidence of her civilization's systematic cruelty. This was proof of everything she had begun to suspect. The Velshar were not noble rulers. They were tyrants who had simply convinced everyone else that their tyranny was inevitable. The transmission took 8 hours. When the last file was sent through the encrypted channels, Levi moved immediately. He released the first batch of documents through 40 different news organizations simultaneously. Within hours, the information was spreading across the galaxy. Chancellor Vexter's response was swift and brutal. He declared a state of emergency. He ordered the arrest of anyone suspected of accessing the restricted archives. He blamed human spies for the security breach. He demanded that all member species increase their military readiness. But the damage was done. Once the truth was loose in the galaxy, no amount of official denial could contain it. 2 days after the first files were released, a Velshar assassination team was detected approaching the horizon's edge. They came in a fighter craft, weapons armed. Marcus immediately ordered the ship to jump to faster-than-light speed, but not before the attackers got close enough to fire warning shots. One of those shots impacted the ship's secondary hull. The collision was devastating. The blast killed 3 human crew members instantly and wounded 6 others. Among the wounded was Dr. Elena Warren, who had been performing routine maintenance in the damaged section when the attack came. Marcus personally carried Elena to the medical bay. Her left arm was badly burned, and she had deep lacerations across her side. But she was conscious. "Get her stabilized," Marcus ordered, his voice carrying the kind of authority that transcended rank. "Whatever resources you need, use them." The medical team worked through the night. They saved Elena's life, though her arm was scarred permanently. And through it all, Kelvin felt the weight of guilt crushing her. These humans were dying because of her. They were sacrificing themselves so the truth could reach the galaxy. When Elena was finally stable, Marcus took Kelvin to see her. Elena was sedated, bandages covering her injuries. Marcus looked at Kelvin, and his expression was harder than she had ever seen it. "Those were good people," he said quietly. "They died trying to protect you. They died trying to expose the truth about your government." "I know," Kelvin said. She felt tears for the first time in centuries. Velshar did not cry. They did not feel weakness. But Kelvin was beginning to understand that what the Velshar called strength was actually just numbness. "Do you?" Marcus asked. "Because this is the cost of truth. This is what it takes to stand against tyranny. And it's not finished yet. Vexter will send more assassins. He will do everything he can to stop you from testifying before the council." "Then I will testify," Kelvin said. "No matter what it costs. These deaths will not be meaningless. Your people have shown me that there are things more important than survival. There are principles worth dying for." Marcus nodded. Then he did something that shocked Kelvin. He reached out and gently touched her shoulder, a gesture of human solidarity. "Welcome to being human," he said. "Not by birth, but by choice." The great chamber of the Galactic Council had been built to intimidate. The ceilings soared to heights that made smaller species feel diminished. The walls were covered in the symbols of Velshar dominance, carved from materials that had taken decades to harvest. The seats were arranged in a hierarchy that made the Velshar seat the most elevated, and each lower species was seated progressively below them. Kelvin walked into that chamber knowing that every eye was on her. She was not dressed in the formal robes that Velshar diplomats typically wore. Those robes belonged to someone who still claimed allegiance to her civilization. Instead, she wore a simple gray suit provided by the human delegation, and she walked beside Captain Marcus Chun. The humans had been granted a temporary seat on the council. It was a minor concession, a token gesture that the other species believed would satisfy humanity's political ambitions. They did not realize that humanity had never wanted dominance. The temporary seat was more than enough. It gave them a voice, and that was all they had ever asked for. Chancellor Vexter sat in the highest seat, his expression carved from ice. He had called this emergency session. He had demanded Kelvin's immediate arrest. He had claimed that she was spreading lies designed to destabilize the galactic order. He had argued that the documents she had released were fabrications, manipulated by human intelligence operatives to undermine Velshar authority. But the documents had already convinced most of the council. Species after species had reviewed the evidence. They had cross-referenced it against their own intelligence data. They had confirmed that what Kelvin had revealed was true. The council leader, an ancient being named Traxxer, who represented the Crow, called the session to order. "We have convened to address serious allegations against the Velshar government," Traxxer said, his voice resonating through translation systems. "The former diplomat Kelvin has requested permission to present evidence before this body. The council will hear her testimony." Kelvin stepped forward. Every camera in the chamber recorded what she did next. Every news organization in the galaxy would broadcast her words within hours. "My name is Kelvin," she began, her voice steady. "I have served the Velshar civilization for 230 years. I have served on the council. I have helped shape Velshar policy. I have been complicit in every crime I am about to describe to you." A ripple of surprise moved through the assembled species. Velshar diplomats never admitted weakness. They never acknowledged fault. But Kelvin was not defending her people. She was condemning them. She presented the evidence methodically. She showed records of the Morthan genocide. She showed proof of the slave trade. She showed documents revealing how the Velshar had deliberately suppressed technology development in less advanced species, keeping them in a state of permanent dependence. The Velshar claim that they rule the galaxy because they are superior, Kelvin said. This is a lie. We rule the galaxy because we created a system designed to prevent anyone else from challenging that rule. We are not superior. We are simply ruthless. We are willing to commit genocide. We are willing to enslave entire civilizations. We are willing to crush any species that might develop the capability to resist us. Chancellor Vexter rose from his seat. His voice was amplified throughout the chamber, a sound like thunder. These are the ravings of a traitor, he declared. This being has been corrupted by human lies. She has been tortured by human agents to betray her own people. This council will not listen to the words of someone so obviously compromised. Then listen to me, a new voice said. Ambassador David Park stepped forward. He was the official human representative to the council, a man in his 60s who had spent the last 3 years learning the complex politics of galactic diplomacy. He was not a warrior. He was a scholar, an expert on cross-cultural communication. I am Ambassador David Park, he said. I represent humanity on this council. 3 weeks ago, one of our exploration vessels encountered a Velshar battleship in distress. Captain Marcus Chen made the decision to attempt a rescue. We found Kelvin dying and abandoned by her own government. We saved her life, not because it benefited us politically, not because we expected anything in return, but because saving life is a core principle of human civilization. Park paused. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Everything Kelvin has presented to you is corroborated by independent human intelligence, Park continued. But here is what you should understand about this situation. Kelvin did not come to us begging for protection. She came to us with evidence that could destroy her own government. She risked everything because she decided that truth was more important than personal safety. That is not human. That is not Velshar. That is simply the mark of a being with moral courage. Vexter's response was immediate and violent. He activated emergency protocols. Armed Velshar security forces appeared in the chamber. They moved toward Kelvin and Marcus with weapons drawn, but Vexter had made a calculation error. He had assumed that the other council members would be shocked into paralysis. He had assumed they would accept his authority without question. He was wrong. The Krull delegation stood. The Katharin stood. The Serati stood. Species after species rose to their feet. They were not armed. They were not soldiers. But they were united in this moment, and that unity was its own kind of power. The human contingent did something remarkable. Instead of drawing weapons, they simply moved between the Velshar security forces and the assembled council. There were only 30 humans in the chamber, guards and support staff. There were 200 Velshar soldiers. But the humans stood firm and did not move. A human soldier named Private Joseph Garcia stepped directly in front of Vexter's personal guard. He was young, barely 25, with the kind of open expression that suggested he had not yet learned to fear death. "Stand down," he said simply. "You can kill me, but if you do, you will have to kill all of us. And if you kill all of us, you will have to answer to every species in this chamber." It was a bluff. It was a calculated risk. And it worked. The Velshar soldiers hesitated. They looked at their chancellor for guidance. Vexter's expression went through a rapid sequence of emotions: anger, fear, finally, resignation. He lowered his hand. The soldiers did not move toward Kelvin. "Remove him," Traxxer said, and he was speaking of Vexter, "and place the Velshar delegation under temporary detention pending investigation of these allegations." The chamber erupted in voices. Species debated. Questions were raised. Plans were made. In the chaos of the moment, Marcus guided Kelvin to a safe area of the chamber. "You did it," he said. "You actually did it." Kelvin looked out at the transformed Galactic Council. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Velshar were not in control. For the first time in that same span, the voices of smaller species were being heard. Laws were being discussed. Policies were being reformed, and it had all started because one ancient Velshar diplomat had closed her eyes expecting to die, only to open them and find a human offering her salvation. The horizon's edge moved through space at a gentle pace, no longer fleeing or fighting. The galaxy had transformed in 3 months. The Velshar government had fractured into factions. Some elements fought to preserve the old order. Others accepted the need for change. Most simply surrendered, recognizing that they could not hold power against the united will of every other species. Kelvin stood at the observation window on the crew deck, watching the stars. Her body had fully healed. The scars remained, but they were no longer visible. The deeper scars, the ones on her mind and spirit, would take longer to fade. She had received word that morning. The International Galactic Court had found the Velshar government guilty of crimes against sentient life. 300 years of oppression had been officially acknowledged. Reparations would be paid. Technologies that had been withheld would be shared. Species that had been enslaved would be freed, and Chancellor Vexter would stand trial for genocide. Marcus found her at the observation window. He had become something like a friend to her over these months. That was strange for Kelvin. The Velshar did not have friends. They had allies and rivals. But Marcus treated everyone with a kind of genuine respect that transcended political calculation. "Ambassador Park sent a message," Marcus said. "The Council has officially granted humanity a permanent seat. Not a temporary observer position. A full, equal seat at the Council table." Kelvin turned to face him. "That is what you wanted from the beginning." "Not quite," Marcus said. "At the beginning, we wanted the chance to prove ourselves. We wanted to show that we could be trusted. We wanted to belong to something larger than ourselves. Getting a seat on the Council is just a way of recognizing that we have accomplished those things. Because of me," Kelvin said. "Because I was willing to sacrifice my own civilization." "No," Marcus said firmly. "Because you were willing to stand for truth. And because my people were willing to support you when it cost us something. That is what earned humanity respect. Not one person's sacrifice, but a species' commitment to principle." Elena Warren joined them at the observation window. Her left arm was in a regeneration cast that would remain on for another month, but she was functional. She had already returned to medical duty, training the newest members of the cross-species medical team that had become her passion project. "The Morthan survivors are beginning to rebuild," Elena said. "They asked if the Horizon's Edge would be willing to visit their world and offer medical assistance. I said yes, assuming you would approve, Captain." Marcus nodded. "Tell them we'll be there in 6 weeks." Kelvin felt something unfamiliar move through her consciousness. It was not sadness. It was not quite happiness either. It was a kind of purpose, a sense that the universe had direction and meaning. Over the following weeks, the Horizon's Edge made its way through the galaxy. At each stop, Kelvin found herself in a different role. She was no longer a Velshar diplomat defending her civilization's honor. She was a bridge between the old order and the new. She helped species understand the mechanisms of Velshar suppression. She assisted in translating bureaucratic documents designed to obscure the truth. She worked to ensure that the transition would be as smooth as possible. The Moratham world was the first major test of this new role. The species that had been nearly extinct was beginning to rebuild its culture. They had lost so much. 200,000 dead. Their cities destroyed. their technology scattered. But they were beginning again. When Kelvin stepped off the shuttle onto Morthan soil, she did not know what to expect. She expected anger. She expected hatred. The Velshar had ordered the destruction of this civilization. There was no way the survivors could forget that an old Morthan, weathered and scarred from the orbital bombardment, approached her. He moved slowly, as though every step caused him pain. "You are Velshar?" he asked. "I am," Kelvin said. She did not try to excuse herself. She did not try to explain. She simply acknowledged the truth. "You are the one who testified against your government," the old Morthan said. "I am. My granddaughter is alive because of your testimony," the Morthan said. "Because you spoke truth, we will receive the resources to rebuild. Because you faced your civilization's crimes, we have the possibility of justice." The old being reached out and touched Kelvin's shoulder. "You are no longer Velshar. You are something greater. You are a being who chose conscience over comfort." Kelvin felt tears form in her ancient eyes. She had spent 2 centuries learning that the Velshar way was the only way. She had spent 2 weeks unlearning everything. And now she was finally beginning to understand what it meant to be truly alive. 6 months later, the Horizon's Edge returned to the galactic capital. The council had called a special session to recognize the humans' contributions to the peace process. Ambassador Park would receive an official award. Captain Marcus would be honored for his role in saving Kelvin and protecting her testimony. But before any of that, Kelvin made an announcement that shocked everyone. She was renouncing her Velshar citizenship. She was accepting honorary human citizenship and a permanent position as the Council's liaison for species reconciliation and reparations. She would spend the rest of her life making sure that what had happened to the Morthan never happened again. "I spent 230 years serving a civilization that was built on lies," she said before the council. "I will spend the rest of my life serving the truth." After the session, Kelvin, Marcus, and Elena stood together on the observation deck of the Horizon's Edge. The ship was preparing for another long voyage. This time, to help a species that had suffered under Velshar control for 300 years. "Do you ever regret it?" Elena asked. "Giving up everything?" Kelvin thought about that question. She thought about the moment she had closed her eyes expecting to die. She thought about opening them to find a human captain holding her with a gentleness that no Velshar had ever shown her. She thought about every moment since then, every choice she had made to align with truth rather than comfort. "No," she said finally. "I regret nothing. I died that day on the luminescence of stars. What came after was a new life. A better life." Marcus smiled. "That's very human of you to say." "Perhaps I am human now," Kelvin said. "Not by birth, but by choice. Just as you said." They stood together watching the stars. 3 individuals from different species, united by something stronger than biology. They were united by a commitment to truth, to justice, to the principle that all life had value and deserved protection. The galaxy had changed because one human had chosen to save a dying alien, and that alien had chosen to save the galaxy in return. It was a simple equation, but it contained the entire history of what would come next. In the days and years that followed, the Horizon's Edge became a symbol of the new galactic order. A ship crewed by humans and other species working together. A ship where hierarchy was based on competence and character rather than species. A ship captained by a human who believed that the strongest force in the universe was not weapons or technology, but the willingness to see value in others and the courage to protect them. And aboard that ship, Kelvin finally found something she had spent 2 centuries searching for in the halls of power and in the bureaucracy of galactic governance. She found home.